So, we're all familiar with the shot that destroyed the Death Star. It's arguably the most important piece of weapons fire in the history of the Star Wars galaxy. Well, today I want to talk about that exhaust port, a bit about how the Death Star is designed, and how exactly one proton torpedo destroyed that massive battle station. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So before we jump into this, bit of a disclaimer, I'm looking past the Force element of all of this, the mysticism of that one proton torpedo shot, and we're going to just talk about the engineering of the Death Star and why a single warhead detonated in the right place could do that much damage. So let's talk about the Death Star's design for a sec. At the core of the battle station is maybe one of the largest hypermatter reactors ever built. It powers most of the station's systems. That reactor is supported by a number of smaller reactors scattered around the station that are used in combination to power not just the station itself, but also the station's superweapon, the super laser that destroys planets. The whole reason this battle station was built. So you end up with a number of independent reactor systems, all generating heat and all generating energy. And all of that heat and all that energy has to be directed out somewhere. Now, when the super laser is firing, there's a bit of an out because you're expelling energy towards whatever that laser is firing at. But in all other regular operations, there has to be some way for that energy to escape, and you would think it would have to be a massive exhaust port, like the size of those big sinkhole-like openings into Lower Coruscant, but what we see on the battle station is one 2-meter-wide exhaust port at the end of a trench. Now, that is a very impressive amount of thermal management if that's all you need to vent the excess gases and heat off into space. So, I'm just going to acknowledge that for a sec. That is very impressive that that's all you need to expel the heat from this massive battle station. But that being said, this exhaust port has ended up being a joke time and time again, from the Family Guy Star Wars special to, well, basically every parody of the original Star Wars movie. Why do you have a tiny hole that if you shoot a torpedo down it, the whole space station blows up? Well, you gotta get that heat energy off somewhere, otherwise the reactor is going to overheat and fail on its own. So, well, the first Death Star solution was a single exhaust port that was modified on the second Death Star to be a vast number of much smaller ports that no one could feasibly fire a explosive projectile down. Now, that's how it behaves under normal operation, but when you're firing the super laser, you're putting extra strain on all of these systems, especially if you're firing with all of the reactors. As we see in Rogue One, the super laser is capable of firing at different power levels, from a single reactor firing, which does the devastation of a large asteroid impact, to a full reactor firing that uses all of the station's reactors and destroys a planet in its entirety. Now, as you would imagine, this puts immense strain on the power systems, and now we could tie all this back to the people involved, most notably Galen Erso, who was one of the lead scientists on Project Stardust, which was the development of the super laser. Now, that's a whole fascinating story that I would like to cover at some point, but for the moment, what we need to really get out of the way is that his whole department was focused on really managing the power from the weapon and being able to get as much power out of the system as possible. And that's why he had the input in how that power was disposed of during the weapon's firing and in normal operation, hence the existence of that single exhaust port. So now that we know how all of this vaguely works, because it's all science fiction, so there's a lot of technobabble in this, let's talk about that really lucky shot. Once that proton torpedo made its way down that exhaust port, it eventually made its way to the main reactor itself, located at the heart of the station, where it detonated. Now, my interpretation of this sequence of events ties in with what's going on in the control room of the Death Star at this moment. As that explosive detonates in the heart of the battle station, it probably does significant damage to the power and heat management systems within the reactor itself. So, as a result, when the power is ramped up to engage the firing sequence for the super laser, when it's lined up with Yavin 4, that power ultimately builds up in the reactor, and before it can be expelled through the super laser and fired towards the moon, it erupts outwards in the explosion that we see that ultimately destroys the battle station. This is actually something that's warned of several times, that if the crystals aren't aligned, it creates a backup amount of waste heat that ultimately overloads the reactor and destroys the entire station. And I believe that what we see at the end of the Battle of Yavin is that exact scenario, but instead of it being waste heat from misaligned crystals in the super laser, it is waste heat as a result of damage to the only thermal exhaust port on the whole battle station. So, hypothetically speaking, under this assumption, it would make sense that if the firing sequence was aborted at that moment, the station could have survived at least a little bit longer, thanks to the lack of a buildup of waste heat. However, it would have eventually built up because even under normal circumstances, that exhaust port is still obviously used to help vent that hypermatter reactor. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters. The core element here is that a single proton torpedo fired down that exhaust shaft ultimately caused a chain reaction that destroyed the battle station, ending the Battle of Yavin in a rebel victory, one of the most significant rebel victories of the Galactic Civil War. Or was it? If you'd like to learn about some of the reasons why it's possible that the Battle of Yavin might be a little bit overstated in its significance within Star Wars history, I'll leave a link up here to a video I made a while back about the Battle of Yavin and why it might not be as significant as many people seem to believe it is. And let me know down in the comments whether you think it makes sense for all of the waste heat from such a massive system to be expelled through one 2-meter wide hole, or do you think there likely was multiples that we just didn't see ever mentioned anywhere in Star Wars? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.